Okay, continuing on. Now we're going to talk about consent. So let me get my head out of the way. This is from that same survey of college students. And so they asked people about if they had been sexually touched without their consent, penetrated, an attempt to penetrate them, right, or rape them, and then an actual penetration without their consent. And you can see the overall percentages are quite high. Okay, so 9% of students had been touched sexually without their consent, so groped or squeezed, or perhaps even something more invasive than that. It is more commonly something that happens to female-bodied people, perhaps in large response to the ways we are socialized to view female-bodied people as sex objects, and for male-bodied people to often feel entitled to them. But it does also happen to male-bodied people, and so it's really important to not forget that when we talk about consent and when we talk about sexual assault and rape. And so just a word about language. So when I use the term sexual assault, that will mean any type of sexual activity without somebody's consent. If I use the term rape, I mean penetration without someone's consent, so anal sex or vaginal sex or forced oral sex. So we can see that this is a really big problem, right? So fully 3% of female-bodied students report being raped. That's really high, and that's not okay. And it's interesting when we talk about this, so much of the language is about how women are raped. And so as this quote says, not how many men raped women, right? We talk about how many girls were harassed, not how many boys harassed girls. We talk about how many women got pregnant, not how many boys impregnated the girls. So Jackson here talks about, the use of the passive voice shifts this focus off of men and boys, who in the case of a male-bodied person assaulting a female-bodied person, which is the more common scenario, right, shifts the focus off of the perpetrators and actually onto the victims, right? So even the term violence against women is problematic. It's this passive construction. There's like this is just something that just happens to women, right? Rather than the fact that, like, no, people are doing this to other people, right? And that's what we need to be talking about, and that's what we need to work to fix, because everyone should be in charge of their own bodies and their own sexuality. So really, the causes of rape are rapists, right? So let's be clear, we need to put the responsibility where it lies. So it's really important that all of us realize that no one ever owes you sex, ever, right? Even if they're your boyfriend or girlfriend and you really want to have sex, they do not owe that to you, right? Just because you took someone on a date or you bought them something really nice, maybe a really fancy piece of jewelry, they do not owe you sex for that, right? Somebody who's dressed really provocatively, right? We're coming up to Halloween, right? They do not owe you sex because they dressed in a really flirty or provocative or scantily clad way, right? And even if somebody flirts with you or, quote, leads you on, they still do not owe you sex, right? Now, it could have been a mistake on their part, right? That they didn't mean to give the impression that they gave, or it could be they were being kind of a jerk, right? That can be a jerk thing to do, to like lead somebody on to make them think that you're going to have sex with them and then say, oh, wait, no. But it still doesn't mean that they owe you sex, right? So just because they're behaving badly does not mean you can assault them, right? Okay. So consent, right, should be freely given and enthusiastic. So as Dr. Marky Bloomer, who teaches the Lifespan Sexuality course, will say, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And we don't always do a good job in our society teaching people how to have conversations about what they want to do and what they don't want to do. And in fact, lots of female-bodied people have been conditioned to think that they should not want sex, right? That it is unladylike or unfeminine or slutty to say, yes, I want to do that. So unfortunately, we have a lot of people who have been conditioned to feel like they can't say yes. We need to change that. We need people to be honest about their desires and what they want to have happen so that communication can be clear. Because the goal in life, when it comes to sex, the goal is not to just have sex, right? The goal is to have good sex. And sex is only good when both people are into it, right? Like if somebody is kind of like just kind of going along with it just because they feel like they have to, that is not good sex, right? And certainly sex where someone is not at all willing is terrible sex. That's not good sex, right? So you don't want to just have sex. You want to have good sex. Wonderful, enthusiastic, fabulous sex when you decide to have sex. So everybody needs to be into it. So I like this from Planned Parenthood. A couple of things about sex or consent, sorry. It should be freely given, right? You can't coerce somebody. You shouldn't pressure somebody into saying yes. It's reversible. You can change your mind at any time. It's informed, meaning they know what you're asking and what's about to happen. It's enthusiastic, meaning they're not like, well, okay, right? They're like, yes, right? It should be enthusiastic. Let's do this. Let's have this fun together. And specific, right? So you don't get consent to do one thing and then start switch to doing something else without checking in with someone. So on the slide before was the link to the Consent is Like Tea video, and definitely watch that. One of the things I've been really struck by working with college students over the years is the number of people who feel like once they've had sex with somebody once, then they can't ever say no to that person, right? And that's wrong, right? Each individual time somebody wants to have sex with you, you get to decide if you want it or not, right? And it doesn't matter that you said yes yesterday. You can say no today, right? Okay, so do you want a cup of tea or do you not want a cup of tea, right? The answer can be different at different times. So Planned Parenthood actually has some really good videos about this that are part of your media assignment. So you definitely need to watch those. There will be questions on the quiz about them. And I find students have a lot of varied responses to these videos. If you're someone who is relatively savvy, shall we say, and has been sexually active for quite some time and is very good at having conversations about consent, then it might seem cheesy and basic to you. But for people who haven't negotiated these conversations before, haven't done so successfully, they can be really useful to give you some ideas about what's okay, what's not, and what are some things that you could say in these different situations that kind of help everybody save face and not do something that they're going to regret later. So that's going to wrap up our section on consent. We have one final bit of this lecture, which is about internal factors that regulate our sexual behavior.